We are now headed to the last 6 months of our chief residence year, and we have a tradition in the Department of Surgery here at UC Davis that goes back a long time to have our chief residents give a grand rounds before they go. Jonathan Lynn, as I think most of you know, is finishing his general surgery residency, but was bitten by the vascular bug during this process, and has matched in vascular surgery and will be going to Loyola because he really enjoys the snow and all of those things there. But Loyola has a grand tradition of excellence in vascular surgery, and so we're excited for him and excited to hear about what I suspect from the title has a lot to do about learning our craft as surgeons. So, Dr. Lynn.
All right, well, thank you and good morning. 6 years ago, I was sitting in the very back watching my chief residents give their grand rounds, and this day felt like an eternity or a lifetime away, but here it is today, and I'm happy for the opportunity to be able to continue this tradition. I like to preface this talk by saying, I used to think that human behavior was extremely hard to change and that, as people, we were essentially stuck in our ways. But while there's some truth to that, over the last year, we've seen some incredible change in our own behaviors and the behaviors of most people. And now it's really difficult to imagine leaving the house without a mask, and shaking hands and standing next to someone kind of feels weird. And I don't know about everybody else, but, it's so ingrained in me now that, when I see replays of old TV shows or look at old pictures, I get a little anxious about how close everybody is together. So that, I like to go into this talk with the mindset that human behavior is actually pretty malleable. So this is the Lost Coast Trail. This is a 25-mile stretch of undeveloped coastline. It takes, I think it's about 5 hours away from Sacramento. But my wife and I hiked this trail along with Kaylee and her husband about 2 years ago at the end of our research year. And what's unique about this trail is that you need to plan your hike in accordance to the tides, and because at high tide, parts of the trail gets washed away. And I put the second picture up here too, the one with the fog here, because the trail actually finishes around the corner, just around this corner. And I remember the last night we were camped out and seeing the lights off in the distance and feeling a little sad because, one, the trail was ending. It was a great time. But really because, I felt that I was so concerned with, timing the tides and keeping the right pace that although I enjoyed my experience, I wasn't sure that I was fully aware and that I wasn't fully appreciative of, the beauty and the special moments along the trail, and that unsure if I was truly present. Every one of our lives is extraordinarily busy, and through no fault of our own, we lead relatively reactive lives, just trying to survive from day to day. But what this experience has really taught me was the importance of being present, being conscious, and being intentional about our lives. And so that led me to the topic of habits. Every day we have interactions, we have decisions and things that we do that are big and small, and much of it is driven by our habits, from seemingly mundane things such as brushing our teeth, flossing, to checking our blind spots before emerging onto the freeway, and checking that we have our wallet, phone, and keys before we leave the house, the old triple tap. But we also have habits that dictate very important things, such as our algorithmic approach to patient care, the consistency in every step as we perform an operation. But it's not only the things that we do, it's not just our actions, but it's also the way we think in our interactions with people. Do we consistently start the day off with a negative perspective? Or do we give the benefit of doubt, or is it our habit to automatically assume the deficiency in others? Or do we constantly think that we have to do something rather than having the habit of thought that allows us to think that we get to do something? Habits lie in our subconscious, and I think it's important to be aware of them and in control of them. And to me, living intentionally is to be conscious and aware of these habits and use them to our benefit to improve our productivity and well-being, both in our professional and our personal lives. So this is my disclosure slide. obviously I have no financial disclosures, but I will say I'm not an expert on human behavior, and much of what I'm presenting is based off of work of people who are much smarter than I am, and I've referenced all of their works at the end of the talk. But this is just a topic that I've taken an interest to, and I've been thinking and learning a lot about lately. And finally, I have plenty of bad habits, and that I'm still working on and learning along with everybody else. So this is a picture of the Millennium Tower in San Francisco. Aside from being extremely large and beautiful and expensive, it's also sinking and tilting. And the reason is because it uses a friction pile foundation, which doesn't actually anchor the building into solid bedrock. While this is an accepted way of constructing a foundation of a building, it's not working quite well for the Millennium Tower. And so habits can be defined as, usual repetitive behaviors or thoughts that are essentially automatic and dictate a significant portion of our daily actions. Or from a different perspective, our habits is our system. They are our foundation, and we owe it to ourselves to make them solid. And one of the most profound statements I read as I was researching this topic was that our result in any goal that we have is the manifestation of our current habits. Whether our goal is in fitness and health is to be like Dr. Galgansky, demonstrating an excellent high bar squat there, or to be productive, like Dr. Cox and Dr. Clark winning yet another award, or to achieve wellness. And I think Jesse's looking pretty well there with Dr. Abramson pushing her around on PEDS wards, or for continued growth. The results of these goals really is the sum of our habits. Where we are today is because of what we were doing 2 or 3 months ago. The person who can retire comfortably started enacting his or her plans years before they reached retirement age. The truly mindful person started developing habits to be reflective and present months ago. And the fit person that we all look up to definitely didn't start exercising just yesterday. Although we may not consciously think of this, I think that we understand this fact. Our habits form our foundation. So I'd like to start now with the importance of habit. 45% of our daily actions are driven by habits. Previous work in behavioral psychology have demonstrated that the strength of a habit, as the strength of a habit increases, the less thought and consideration is given to initiate a goal-directed behavior. So in other words, the stronger the habit, the less intention-driven it is, and the less we think about it, and instead we just do it. And habit can be cued without the intention for action. And that's good. It can be good for healthy habits such as exercising or choosing healthy foods from the cafeteria. You don't really have to think about it. But you can see how it can also be bad for unhealthy habits such as late night snacking or the overuse of social media. So in our time this morning, I hope to be able to break down the components of behavior and offer some strategies and methods to show that habits are more than just repeated thoughts and actions, and offer some and use these strategies to help manage our current habits and build new ones. So there are many iterations of this, but the building blocks of a habit essentially breaks down to these 3 components. First, we start with the cue or prompt that then triggers a response in the form of a behavior. That then results in a reward. And the reward is either internal, such as the satisfaction from eating a cookie, the runner's high when you get during a run, or the mindfulness from peace from meditation. Or it can be external, such as compensation, recognition, success, praise. But either situation, it induces an emotional response. And each one of these blocks need to be present for a behavior to become a habit. Oops. For example, in the pre-COVID area, coming to this conference and seeing all the bagels, donuts, and coffee, at least for me, I'm cued. I'm prompted. I began to want a coffee and donut, and so I take one. It tastes good, it feels good, and Tuesday mornings become associated with drinking coffee and having a donut. And to be honest, since COVID, these conferences really just haven't been the same. But there are other examples, coming home from a long day of work, all we want to do is relax. We're prompted by the big screen TV sitting in our living room So we turn on Netflix or Hulu and binge watch a show. This takes our mind off of things and offers an escape. Relaxation is then associated with binge watching TV shows, and you can see how this then starts forming a habit or cycle. And in the same vein, how many times have we sat down to read or write, and then we're prompted by the stress and instinctively pick up our phones to check whatever is going on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. It's almost like an adult pacifier. And then sitting down to work is then associated with, first checking your phone and being distracted. But it doesn't only apply to bad habits, obviously. It applies to good habits, and anyone who has ever rounded with Dr. Z that knows that taking the elevators up a few floors is not a thing. It's a habit to take the stairs. We're prompted by the need to go up a few floors, and our response is to take the stairs. And our reward is getting some exercise during rounds. Dr. Salcedo has been trying to beat this into us for years, which is developing the habit of immediately logging our cases. We're supposed to be prompted by the completion of a case, and our behavior is then to open up ACGME app or browser and log our case. And we're supposed to be rewarded by the satisfaction of checking off a to-do item. So that finishing a case should be associated with logging your case. But as you can tell, habits that are not constructive, or what we call bad habits, seem to be easy to perpetuate, while good habits seem to be harder to build. But when we start to think about it, it's evident. Bad habits have an immediate reward, while good habits have a general delayed reward. So how can we promote building good habits and breaking bad ones? I'd like to start here with the center. At the center of a habit is our behavior. And this graph from B.J. Fogg, Dr. Fogg, represents the anatomy of a behavior. B.J. Fogg, he is a behavior scientist at Stanford who is the founder of their behavior design lab and also the author of the book Tiny Habits. And he breaks it down in his book in this very, very helpful graphic. So he breaks it down such that behavior is made up of three components: motivation, ability, and prompt. And as you can see in this graph here, the motivation is motivation, which is essentially how much you want to do something, and it's graphed here on the y-axis. The ability, which is how easy or hard something is to do, is on the x-axis. And the prompt on either side of this action line. So things that are below the action line fail to spur action or trigger a behavior. Things that are above the action line results in a behavior. And so this provides an extremely useful lens in which we can begin to use to understand why we do the things we do. Looking at this graph, we can see that motivation and ability are essentially compensatory elements, as he describes. And what that means is things that are hard to do, such as stick to a very strict reading schedule, requires a high motivation in order to be above the line and result in behavior. Things that are, on the flip side, things that are easy to do, such as watching Netflix, don't require very much motivation at all. The truth is, as we all know, however, motivation is periodic. It comes and goes and is unreliable. And it's difficult to build something that should be our system or our foundation on something that waxes and wanes. And managing habits, I think, is very much a skill, and we need to have strategies to be in control of our habits. So doing a quick Google search, if you just search managing habits or methods, it will land you in multiple results. It's a plethora of results. Lots of people have written about it. But I think James Clear, in his book Atomic Habits, expertly presents it, but really boils it down to these four concepts. Modifying motivations, being intentional about our habits, making things easier, and ensuring satisfaction, or making sure that we feel good about what we're doing. So our first strategy is modifying our motivation. And I feel like this element deals with motivation, the motivation part of the equation, and personally I feel that this is the most difficult aspect to address. As we know, motivation is waxing and waning, is a waxing and waning commodity, and in order to be able to use it, we need to be able to somehow influence it. We certainly can plaster our walls with as many motivational posters as we can and phrases, or change our wake-up alarm ringtone to a motivating song. But we've all been there, and we're all too familiar with that. Usually results in fatigue, signal fatigue, alarm fatigue, and it really doesn't really work. And although it certainly is the most difficult thing to do and to address, we can attempt to modify our motivation and be in control with a few strategies. The first strategy is deals with internal motivation and is based off of the relativity theory of reinforcement, or Premark's principle, which is developed by Dr. David Premark, who was a professor of psychology at Penn. And it's essentially pairing something you have to do with something that you want to do. His principle states that less probable behaviors can be reinforced by more probable behaviors, meaning that behaviors that you more easily want to do can be used to motivate more difficult behaviors. That sounds very complex, but really we all know what this is. It's also called Grandma's Law, or Grandma's Rule, and it's called that because it's very intuitive, and we've all done it. Or have heard it. People who are parents have all said, eat your dinner, then you can watch TV. Or do your homework, and you can go out and play. But if you're not a parent and you have a dog, this principle is actually used frequently, especially by the American Kennel Club, to train dogs. If you're training a dog to play fetch, you have them bring the ball back, and we can play another round of fetch. A hard behavior is motivated by an easier behavior. And we can also do this for ourselves. For instance, I first thing I do every morning is I need my coffee, right? I think I'm not alone in that. And I love coffee first thing in the morning. So I tell myself, get up early, don't hit the snooze button, and you can have a cup of coffee before starting the day. Or we can finish, or if you want to, social media, we put a lot of, we demonize it a little bit, but, it's still fun. So finish 1 hour of reading, and we can browse for 15 minutes, guilt-free. The next two strategies in modifying our motivation essentially go hand in hand, and they deal with external motivators. And those are building accountability and then ensuring that you're surrounded by people with similar goals. Building accountability is an extraordinarily effective way to modify our extrinsic motivation for a particular behavior. Primarily for us residents, it's only a natural reaction that if we know the chances of getting pimped or quizzed is 100%, then the chances of studying extra hard is also 100%. People who are trying to get in shape will hire trainers and coaches to keep track of them, to keep track of an exercise program or a nutrition plan. But really also what they function as is someone who would be disappointed at you if you didn't meet the goals that they set for you. And time and time again, we've set the goal of getting up early to exercise. If we're being honest with ourselves, that's actually really hard to do. Getting up early to go on a run or go to the gym is hard, but setting up a time with a partner, say we'll meet at the park at 6 a.m. or we'll see you at the gym at 5 a.m., makes it much, much harder to stay in bed. This first picture here, I included this one, James, Kara, and I, because we were the 2019 lap bowl team at the NorCal ACS meeting. And I included it because we set up a time to practice together in the sim lab, and it made it much harder for us to skip out on each other because whether we were busy or tired, and making sure that we actually showed up every time to practice. And finally, ensuring that our surrounding environment is conducive to whatever behavior that we're trying to foster or break is vital. We all know this. It's difficult to start a habit of eating healthy if we don't have buy-in from our family or the people that we live with. And we've seen it in our patients. It's difficult to get someone to stop smoking if everyone in their social circle is still smoking. On the contrary, it's much easier to build a habit of reading or being up to date on research and practices and overall improving if everyone you work with is also seeking to get better. And this applies to thought processes as well. As Dr. Rinnick alluded to last week in her talk, innovations, new ideas are much better promoted in a purpose-built environment with people who have a habit of accepting new ideas and are also looking to improve. And so although we're able to affect our internal and external motivations to a degree, we know that it's impossible to be constantly motivated. Motivation is important, but we can't build our base off of something that comes and goes. And consistency is key to forming strong habits and that ultimately become our foundation. So that leads me to the next strategy, which is being intentional. And there's several methods within this strategy. Being intentional with fostering our habits. And what this strategy deals with is the cue or prompt in the anatomy of a behavior. And depending on whether we are trying to build or break a habit, these strategies should bring the cue or the prompt to the forefront of our attention or make them invisible if we're trying to break a habit. The first method here is implementation intention rather than goal intention. And that really just has to be doing with being more specific. And what I mean, though, by that is goal intention may sound something like this. I will make healthier food choices. But implementation intention includes a behavior, a time, and a place. It's more specific. It will sound something like this. When I go to the cafeteria for a snack, I will choose an apple over a bag of chips. And essentially, it's a commitment phrase used to formulate a plan to filter through the many distractions that we have in life. You go into the cafeteria knowing that you're going to get an apple. You're not going to get distracted by, the tower of chips right at the checkout line. We've all used this to some extent, but may not just be completely aware of it. For instance, this may sound familiar. I will write the brief op note after the case while still in the operating room. This is standard practice for many of us. Or should be. But being conscious of this point allows us to use the same mentality and apply it to any behavior we wish to build into a habit. So, for instance, if we're building a habit of writing, I will work on a manuscript for 1 hour at 8 a.m. in my office. If we're building a habit of study, I will read or do questions for 1 hour after the kids go to bed. If we're trying to build a habit of positivity, I will greet my partner or spouse with a smile and hug every time I come home from work. These same strategies can be used in avoidance behaviors as well. So, for instance, I will not have a late night snack and when I sit on my couch to watch Netflix this evening in my living room until what habit I'm trying to break. The second strategy with being intentional is what Dr. Fogg calls anchoring, or James Clear calls habit stacking. And essentially, they're all the same thing. It's linking a habit in which you are trying to implement to a existing strong habit. For myself, like I said, I wake up every morning and I need to make a cup of coffee. So my strong habit is making a cup of coffee. And so if I'm trying to incorporate meditation into my habit, it will sound something like this. After I make my morning cup of coffee, I will meditate for 2 minutes. If we're trying to promote a more open environment amongst our teams, it can sound like this. After I get to the workroom for pre-rounds, I will say good morning to everyone on the team. If we're trying to build the habits of being a safe surgeon, after I place the laparoscope, I will check for iatrogenic injury. And if we're building a habit to improve as a resident, and we want feedback, after I close the fascia, I will ask for feedback. And finally, the last part of being intentional is optimizing our environment to promote success in whatever behavior we're trying to promote or trying to build. And this deals with a prompt or a cue. The prompt or a cue is extraordinarily powerful, and we need to be intentional about our environment. It's been shown in multiple studies that habits are activated by context. My favorite example is in medical school. I did this without really knowing it. I had this very big computer screen on my desk, and I knew it was a distraction. I was distracted by it for my first year of medical school, my second year of medical school. So as I prepared myself to take step one, to study for step one, I took the monitor, I unhooked it, and I stuffed it in my closet. And then I cleared off my entire desk so that there was nothing on there except my laptop. And I didn't take anything out until the test was over. But we can do this with other things too. If our phone is a distraction and we want to get some work done, we place it in another room or place it in our bag for the set amount of time that we're trying to get something done. We can turn off all of our notifications for our social media apps so we will only check on them when we intend to check on them. If our goal is to make breakfast every morning, we can set out the ingredients for our breakfast and the cooking utensils the night before to make the morning easier. And for and for those of us who are scared straight by all the hemorrhoids that we see in colorectal clinic and want to drink more fiber, we can put our Metamucil at eye level so that every time we open the pantry, we're prompted to drink your fiber. Oops, sorry. And with the same in the same concept, if we're trying to avoid snacking, we can either not buy the snacks or move the snacks out of their direct view, so that we're not always triggered every time we open the pantry. And if we use all of these strategies together, we can really start building a strong foundation for our behavior. One great example is actually in the trauma division that uses all three of these strategies to implement a habit of expressing daily gratitude. For those of us or those who haven't been to a morning review or a morning report, we begin the conference before discussing the admissions from the previous day and the cases for the current day. The call team from the overnight will say something that they're grateful for. This is implementation intention. This will come directly after we've logged into the room, and this is stacking. Our strong habit is logging into the room, which is then followed by expression of daily gratitude. And the environment is optimized. Everyone is seated. Everyone is focused on the conference. There's minimal distractions. And so you can see by using these methods, we can be very intentional about our behaviors that we want to promote. The next strategy is to make it easier. This point, to making it easier, centers on the idea that it's only natural to go down the path of least resistance. And aside from being intentional with the prompt, we can also make things easier, more able to do. And I like to think about it like decreasing the price of admission. We need to lower the barrier and make things more accessible to ourselves. We need to do what we can to decrease the effort to perform a desired behavior. And we can do this through two methods that are immediately within our grasps. One, by adjusting our environment, or two, by adjusting the behavior itself. So adjusting the environment. I took this to an extreme. I used to wake up at 4 a.m. when I was an intern, first moved to Sacramento. I used to wake up at 4 a.m. every day and drive down to the 24-hour fitness downtown to try to get my workouts in. Naturally, this is not the path of least resistance, and it took a lot of motivation to stick to that schedule, and naturally, I was not very consistent. So to make it easier, I got a gym. I put a gym in my garage, and doing so has allowed me to be more consistent with my health and fitness throughout residency. It sounds crazy, but I know I'm not alone. I know a lot of my co-residents have also built gyms and attendings as well. They've bought Pelotons and outfitted their own garages. But it doesn't have to be this drastic. If you want to build a habit of exercise, you can bring your gym clothes or bag to work with you rather than having to return home before going to the gym or going out on a run. Post-COVID, we may even choose a gym that's on our way home. And to add to the strategy from a previous slide, we can incorporate implementation intention. After I leave work, I will exercise at the gym that is conveniently on my way home. If we want to be better about logging our cases on time, we can make it easier by downloading the app and keep the account logged in rather than opening up the ACGME browser and then typing your username and then the password every single time you want to log a case. And we can even make it easier on ourselves by having a robust favorites list so you don't have to search for every case that you want to log every single time. Promise, Dr. Salcedo did not ask me to say this. But if we want to build a habit of cooking our meals, but are naturally turned off by the idea of the resultant pile of dishes, we can try one pot or one pan recipes. Less dishes, much more likely to cook. Or buy tools to make the behavior easier. For instance, we have an Instapot. In case anyone doesn't know what an Instapot is or hasn't heard of it, it's a multi-cooker that can be a slow cooker, a pressure cooker, a rice cooker. It can saute, it can even make yogurt. The idea is, regardless, it's something where you can throw a bunch of ingredients into, press a button, and walk away. When things are easier, we're just simply more likely to do them. And the contrary is true. If we want to discourage a behavior, we make it more difficult. If we want to go to social media less, I recently did this. We can group all the apps into one folder and then move it off your home screen so that you're not always prompted when you open up your phone or you turn on your phone. And if it's off your home screen, you actually have to work. You have to swipe a few times before you actually get to it. I put it all the way at the very end. And if that isn't enough, and you want to go really extreme, you can actually, short of deleting everything, but you can log out of all your accounts, and so that every time you actually you want to see anything, you have to type your password and your username and password. I think for me, that would actually make me stop using it. And I heard a few examples on other podcasts about people who actually plug their internet routers into a timer that then shuts off at 10 p.m. In order to make it harder for them to browse the internet around bedtime so that they can get a better night of sleep and not affect their sleep hygiene. And then the next part of making it easier is adjusting the behavior. And the idea is to start small. And I really love this concept of starting small because we don't run before we can walk. We learn to tie before we can sew, and we learn to sew before we do an operation. And like many things we do in life, building and maintaining habits is truly a skill. Dr. Fogg writes about it pretty extensively in his book. His recommendation is that we take any behavior that we want to develop into a habit and pare it down to a step so easy that we can reliably do it without interruption. The cornerstone of any habit is consistency, and the idea here is to begin with baby steps in order to build that consistency. Going with the theme of exercise, if we're trying to build a habit of working out 3 times a week, we can start by showing up for a pared down version of a workout. Instead of going to the gym for an hour, just show up for 10 minutes and do it consistently. Once that consistency is built and going to the gym is part of your Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, it can then be built up from there. We need to build the base. He gives an example that's, I thought, pretty extreme, but it worked for him. He talked about how he started flossing. He started flossing 1 tooth at a time. Every time, brush your teeth, 1 tooth. And eventually did that enough where flossing became a habit, and he was able then to scale it up to be able to consistently floss all his teeth. James Clear also writes about the same concept in his book, Atomic Habits, and he calls it the 2-minute rule. And that really is to pare any behavior down into something that can be accomplished in 2 minutes. Perform that behavior reliably before scaling it up into the intended behavior. So if we want to build a habit of meditating, we can commit to 2 minutes and then scale up. If you want to build a habit of reading, we can start by reading 1 page, 1 paragraph, and then scale it up. If you want to build a habit of doing daily questions, we can start by logging into the question bank every day and doing 1 question, and then scale it up. Each time we successfully do a behavior, we feel good. And it goes without saying that we are always more encouraged to do something when we feel good about what we are doing. And which leads me to our last strategy, and that's ensuring satisfaction or ensuring reward. You know, a behavior really doesn't become a habit unless it's associated with a positive emotion. You know, this happens to us over and over again in our daily lives, whether we are aware of it or not. I don't know if anyone has seen the documentary on Netflix, The Social Dilemma. It really puts it out there plainly. You know, when we post something on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, that little red notification pops up that someone either has liked or commented on your post, and generates a positive feeling that someone is paying attention to you or liking what you're saying or posting. And this emotion is addictive, and it keeps us coming back to these apps for more and more. The problem is that generally good habits like reading or working out don't have an immediate payout in terms of positive feelings, while bad habits like eating sweets or binging on Netflix brings an immediate satisfaction. But it's not that good habits don't have good immediate positive effects. It's just that they're not as apparent and may require some effort or a different lens in order for us to see them. One strategy that many people who write about habits promote is a strategy of habit tracking. What that does, it provides a visual accountability as well as a strong sense of satisfaction to cross a day off and add another win to our column. And as as this picture shows, we can either physically cross it out on a calendar or keep track of what we're doing with a habit tracker app. Ultimately, what we need to do is recognize success and allow ourselves to feel good about it. Again, Dr. Fogg introduces this habit or the strategy of a celebration after each time we successfully complete a behavior. Literally, he says, it's a fist pump, or an inward smile, or a pat on the back. And whatever it is, for us to create a genuine positive feeling to associate with the behavior we had just completed. The intention is to create repeated positive emotions with that behavior. And admittingly, it may feel hokey, it may feel artificial, but when we think about it in the larger context, each time we successfully complete the behavior, it's an accomplishment. It's an accomplishment towards who we want to become. Every workout we complete is one step towards becoming a healthier person. Every midnight snack we avoid is one step towards becoming a person with control over our eating. Every time we meditate, it's one step towards becoming a more mindful person. Every time we express gratitude, it's one step towards becoming a more appreciative person. And so we should be proud of those things. So this leads me to the last point here. I think habits are more than just automated actions on repeat. And ultimately, we are the summation of our habits. And this last bullet point here, I didn't come up with this, but I thought it was very powerful. And that's that behaviors really only become habits when they become part of our identity. And when we start thinking that I have a habit of not missing a workout, or I have a habit of making healthy food choices because I am someone who cares about my health. I have a habit of reading because I am someone who cares about learning. I have a habit of meditation because I am someone who cares about mindfulness. And honestly, if we're not that person yet, it just means that we haven't built the habits to get there yet. These are my references here. Thank you for your attention this morning. I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank my wife, who for all of her support through these years, and obviously putting up with all of my shenanigans since we were teenagers. And of course, my original class and in my reshuffled class, I don't have a picture of our reshuffled class because of COVID. But anyways, I can't ask for a better group of people to go through residency with. Thank you.
Jonathan, that was fabulous. I loved all the pictures along the way. But that's what the residents have been doing all this time. Really fun.
Thank you.
Wow, I found myself thinking two things. That first of all, surgery is a summation of habits, that it's a whole new skill that we learn, and that comes, I thought you described it incredibly well.
Right, thank you.
And I'll also just give you a piece of advice that habit building never goes away.
Yes.
You're not done once you get one habit. It's a lifelong journey. So developing a practice for it is really great.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. Just want to ask you, how did you decide you wanted to do vascular?
That's a great question. Initially when I was a medical student, I had thought about applying to an integrated program. I've always really enjoyed vascular surgery, but a lot of my mentors were general surgeons, surgical oncologists, so I thought I'd give that a try. But ultimately, it's just what I was really interested in. And every single time I open a book, I enjoy the vascular chapters the most. I enjoy the vascular cases. I enjoy the innovation, the creativity, and the wide variety of complex and of cases that vascular surgeons are able to provide, and also the lifelong care that we provide our patients. It's not a one and done thing. It's a lifelong thing, kind of like habits.
Well, I really, I wanted to ask you that because I know there are interns and people in the audience that are just starting, and that to let them know it happens, that you really do know that this is what feels right for you. It's hard to describe how that happens.
Absolutely.
But anyway, congratulations. I'd love to open it up for questions. Manny, from the...
Dr. Ali says, that was very interesting and informative. Thank you. Dr. Humphreys, questions. Looking back, what is one habit you wish you would have started as a junior resident?
Oh. So Mindfulness. It sounds very, like, coming from me, my fellow residents, coming from me, that sounds like crazy, right? But really, I think mindfulness and being present. Because as I come to the end of my residency here, and I notice that every day, I have this month and next month is my last month at UC Davis. And every day that I come in, that's one less day that I get to be at this hospital. And really appreciating what a unique opportunity training here is, and also being a surgical resident. I tell this to all the medical students that there really is nothing else like this in the hospital, and I still stand by that to this day. I've enjoyed my training, as hard as it has been, but really mindfulness and being present and really appreciating everything that we get to do on a day-to-day basis. I think that helps, significantly getting through any of the difficult times or difficult situations that we're faced with.
Dr. Hiroshi, looks like you wanted to
Jonathan, that was a great talk, and I have to tell you, you're an enlightened human being, because some of us take, into our 6th decade of life to try and figure out some of this stuff. But in all honesty, I think these are lessons that are going to serve you really well in the future, and I'm not surprised at all that you figured this stuff out. But all that stuff that people tell you, and you're supposed to do, like sleep well, eat well, take care of yourself. It's so critical, and it's never more so critical the older you get. So I really applaud you, and it's a great topic. And so thanks for that talk.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Hiroshi.
Thank you for your great talk. Really interesting, and it made me reflect over, my time here, time on research. One of the things I was thinking about was the accountability portion, and with COVID, we're not able to gather as much as we are. And I mean, we are lucky in the fact that we get to come to work and be with our co-residents, but outside of work, some of our habits, I think, are a little bit harder to maintain. And I was wondering if you had thought of any other ways to maintain the accountability now with COVID.
Yeah, certainly. Accountability both comes internally and externally. Part of it is, one thing for me is to try to stay on top of my workouts. I use the Habit Tracker app. I'm currently trying to build a habit of meditation. And so having an app, having a tracker that you can physically open up and see that, okay, I made it through all these days, I want to continue my streak, I think is extraordinarily helpful. And of course, although we are kind of cut off physically from our peers, we live in the digital age, and we can have an incredible amount of connectedness with people of similar interests and people who are trying to do similar things. So joining online forums, groups, and like-minded individuals to help keep you on track, I think is a powerful way to do it.
Jonathan, thank you again.
All right.
Look forward to the remaining months that you have here, and wishing you all the best in the next phase of this.
Great, thank you.
Really fantastic presentation.
All right, thank you, Dr. Thomas.